Dan's foot hovered over the final step. The basement air was thick and cold, musty like old books and forgotten things. He flicked on the single bulb, its weak light doing little to penetrate the oppressive darkness. Cobwebs brushed his face, thick and dusty. His heart pounded a steady rhythm against his ribs. He had lived in this house for years, the basement, always a place of mystery. His grandmother had forbidden him from ever venturing down. Too many memories, she'd say, her voice trembling. Now she was gone, the house silent except for the creaking floorboards beneath Dan's feet. Curiosity, like a persistent itch, had finally won. He saw it then, tucked away in the far corner. A door he hadn't noticed before. It was old, made of thick, warped wood bound in iron. A shiver danced down Dan's spine. He reached out, his hand shaking slightly as he grasped the cold metal handle. With a groan, the door creaked open. Dan took a deep breath and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. A wave of decay so strong it made his eyes water. He coughed, waving his hand in front of his face as he tried to clear the air. Then he saw it. In the center of the room hung a corpse. It twisted slowly from a thick chain attached to the ceiling. The body was skeletal, its skin stretched taut over bones. Empty sockets stared back at Dan, accusing and hollow. He staggered back, bile rising in his throat. The floor was stained a dark, rusty brown. Puddles of dried blood, cracked and flaking, spread out from beneath the body like a macabre halo. The air hung heavy with the stench of death, thick and cloying. Dan gagged, turning away from the gruesome sight. He wanted to run, to flee back up the stairs and forget he ever saw this place, but something held him there, rooted to the spot. A morbid fascination, perhaps. Or maybe a growing sense of dread that whispered of something far worse lurking in the shadows. He forced himself to look back at the corpse. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he noticed something else. Deep, ragged gashes covered the body, tearing through flesh and bone with brutal efficiency. These were no ordinary wounds. Dan's gaze traveled to the wall behind the corpse. There, scrawled in what he realized was dried blood, was a single word: help! The letters were shaky, desperate, a final plea for salvation from a soul trapped in unimaginable torment. The words seemed to pulse in the dim light, amplifying the terror that coiled in Dan's gut. Whoever, whatever, had done this was something monstrous, something powerful and cruel. He felt a chill crawl down his spine, raising goosebumps on his arms. He thought of his grandmother, her warnings echoing in his ears. Had she known about this? About the horrors hidden beneath her home? What had she seen in her lifetime? What secrets did she carry to her grave? His hand trembled as he reached out to touch the word. The blood was flaky and dry, crumbling beneath his fingertips. As he did, a low growl echoed from the darkness behind him. A growl that spoke of unimaginable hunger and raw primal power. Section 4. The stomach portal. Dan spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. The growl seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. He stumbled back, fear constricting his throat and stealing his breath. Two blood-red eyes materialized from the darkness, burning like hot coals. The creature stepped into the dim light, and Dan gasped. It was massive, easily twice the size of a man. Its skin was a sickly green, stretched taut over bulging muscles. Four arms, thick as tree trunks, ended in razor-sharp claws. Its face was a grotesque mockery of a human's, with a gaping maw filled with rows of jagged teeth. But the most terrifying feature was the portal in its stomach. A swirling vortex of colors, it pulsed with an otherworldly light. Dan stared, mesmerized and horrified as a dark shape began to emerge from its depths. This was no ordinary monster. This was something ancient, something evil. Section 5. Emergence. The creature from the portal oozed out, its form shifting and changing. It resembled a mass of writhing tentacles, slick with a viscous fluid. Each tentacle pulsed with a life of its own, tipped with sharp barbs that glistened in the dim light. The stench of rot intensified, making Dan gag. The first monster, the four-armed beast, let out a guttural roar. It was a sound that spoke of triumph, of a task completed. The creature from the portal, still writhing and taking shape, pulsed with a light that matched the portal in the larger monster's stomach. They were connected somehow. The pulsing light from the portal intensified, bathing the room in an eerie glow. Shadows danced and twisted, reflecting the terror that clawed at Dan's mind. He was trapped, caught between the monstrous creature before him and the unimaginable horror emerging from its depths. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he had stumbled upon something far beyond human comprehension. This was a nightmare brought to life, a glimpse into a realm of darkness he could never have imagined. Section 6. Growth. The tentacled creature writhed and pulsed, growing larger with each passing second. It pulled itself further out of the portal, its form becoming clearer. What were once indistinguishable appendages began to take on a more defined shape. Claws, longer and sharper than those of the first beast, glinted menacingly. The first monster stepped aside as if presenting its creation. Its blood-red eyes, fixed on Dan, seemed to burn with a cold, calculating intelligence. He was being studied, analyzed. Dan felt a wave of dizziness wash over him, the stench of decay and the pulsing light from the portal overwhelming his senses. He had to get out, had to escape the nightmare unfolding before him, but his legs felt like lead, his body frozen in place by terror. The tentacled creature, now almost fully emerged from the portal, let out a shriek that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. As the creature continued to grow, dwarfing even its monstrous brethren, Dan knew that escape might be impossible. He was trapped in a nightmare, the darkness closing in around him, and he was completely at the mercy of the creatures from the portal.